I'm sitting in my car on a breezy Saturday evening, both hands strangling the steering wheel, trying not to smash my fist into the dashboard. A dozen different emotions churn in my gut: rage, humiliation, betrayal, and a deep throbbing heartbreak that I can't seem to shake. This is supposed to be my big night, my 50th birthday, a half century on this earth, busting my ass and trying to do right by my family, only for them to ambush me in front of people I've known for decades. Let me back up and give you a picture of my life. My name is Eugene Wilson. At least that's what my driver's license says for now. I'm from Houston originally, but settled in this mid-sized town upstate when Bernice, my ex-wife, decided she wanted a change of scenery. We were married for 19 years, raised 3 boys, and 8 years ago, she decided she'd had enough of my supposed boring nature. Apparently, being a steady provider who comes home every evening isn't exciting enough to keep a woman entertained. I've always been a quiet man, a steady worker, and a father who believed in discipline balanced with genuine love. I'm no saint, no father is, but I tried. If you ask me, it wasn't enough. If you ask my boys, it was too much the wrong way, or maybe not enough in the right ways. I never can tell because each one of them has a different gripe. Salvador, the oldest, at 29, Franklin at 26, and Damien at 23. 3 sons who collectively decided that their mother is more fun, that she's the parent who understands, while I'm just the wallet that funds their lifestyle. That's been my role for so many years. I've paid bills, tuition, and every surprise expense that came up, never wanting them to go without. Even though Bernice and I split and signed those divorce papers when the kids were still relatively young, Damien was 15, Franklin 18, Salvador in his early 20s, I always thought I'd still be dad. Nothing could have prepared me for what happened tonight, though. The entire fiasco stems from a phone call I got 3 weeks ago from Salvador. He said, "We've been talking, Dad. We'd like to throw you a 50th birthday party, to celebrate your life." I almost dropped my phone. For nearly a decade, any conversation we had revolved around them needing something: money for an unpaid credit card, bailouts for Franklin's gambling, a nudge for Damien's tuition. This, though, sounded different. I swallowed my cynicism and said, "Sure, Sal. That's really nice. I'd appreciate it." I told myself maybe they'd come around. Maybe the realization that I won't be on this planet forever had finally cracked the hostility. I prayed it meant they were ready to set aside the bitterness from the divorce and find some measure of genuine warmth. Maybe, deep inside, I still wanted them to see me as a decent dad who tried his best. So here I am, gripping the wheel as tears of anger threatened to slip down my cheeks, all because that so-called birthday party turned into one long, carefully orchestrated humiliation. Salvador and his brothers had commandeered a projector at the local brewery's event room, and once the party was in full swing, 30 or so people mingling, many of them from my own circle, Sal taps his glass and says, "We have a special presentation to celebrate Eugene's 50th year on this earth. Hope everyone's ready." I watched as they dimmed the lights and pulled up a video. I expected something typical: old photos, maybe a few corny jokes about dad bods. Instead, Bernice's voice comes over the speakers, smooth and almost documentary-like. Eugene Wilson, failed husband, failed father, failed man. My face went hot. People laughed at first, the way you laugh when you're sure it's some kind of comedic roast, but it didn't stop. There were photos of my old beat-up car that died after 3 months, some half-finished home improvement projects. My sons made sure to highlight every shortcoming, every random moment in my life that could be twisted into evidence of my ineptitude. Then came the gut punch. Bernice started detailing my shortcomings in bed. He never satisfied me. "Honestly, I faked it for most of our marriage, and that's why I left," she said on screen. I could hardly believe it was real. People, old friends, neighbors, coworkers, turned to look at me in shock or pity. Some of them laughed, actually laughed. I felt more naked in that moment than I had in my entire life. The humiliation was so surreal, so carefully choreographed, that I couldn't fathom how my own sons allowed it, let alone took part in it. It ended with them all saying they were changing their last name, my name. Salvador looked right into the camera and said, "We'd rather have no father than one who never showed up when it mattered." I kept waiting for someone to come out and say it was an awful prank, that they'd gone too far, but no one did. Silence fell over the room, broken only by a handful of uneasy chuckles. 30 sets of eyes stared at me. I said nothing. I just stood, cleared my throat, and thanked everyone for coming. Then I walked out, leaving behind the wreckage of my so-called birthday celebration. That's how I ended up here in my car, engine idling in a back parking lot near a closed hardware store. My phone is blowing up with texts from Bernice and the boys, apparently needing my signature on something for them to finalize the name change. The gall. That's the last connection they have to me, right? My worthless last name, I mutter to myself. They humiliated me in front of all those people, some of whom I've known for decades. And now, they expect me to help them sever the last legal tie. My eyes sting with the memory. I push the tears back, switch off my phone, and decide it's time for real payback. I spent the next week in near isolation. I took a couple of personal days from work, called in sick 1 or 2 more, which is wildly uncharacteristic of me, but I didn't give a damn. I sat in my small, tidy living room, the same living room Bernice used to complain was too cramped, staring at the photos on the mantel. One is a picture of the 5 of us at a campground back when the boys were small. Even in that photo, I'm fiddling with a canister, trying to get dinner ready while Bernice smirks at the camera, a half-bored look in her eye. Salvador's grin is missing 2 teeth, Franklin's hand is sticky with melted marshmallow, and Damien's face is half buried in a blanket. They look happy in that snapshot, or so I always told myself. For 8 years, I've been overshadowed by a thick sense of guilt, like I'd somehow let them down. I tried to buy my way back into their lives, covering bills, emergency expenses, picking up the slack if Bernice was short on funds. Truth is, I was always that type. If something was broken, I'd fix it. That extended to people, especially my kids. So I stepped up whenever they needed help, even when it was financially crippling me. But after the birthday party, something in me shattered. I couldn't keep letting them walk all over me. That day in my living room, I made a list of every major payment or favor I'd done for each child. Salvador, 29, contributed to half his mortgage every month for the past 3 years. They got a huge house in a plush neighborhood they couldn't afford. I ponied up $1,200 a month. Franklin, 26, has a monster gambling habit. I bailed him out multiple times, once for $8,000, another for 5, plus countless smaller amounts. Damien, 23. His college tuition wasn't covered after Bernice ran out of money. I paid his fees plus some living expenses so he could avoid working full-time. Altogether, it was a small fortune. Not that I was rolling in money. I was living modestly and funneling everything I could spare into them. If they'd still hated me but at least allowed me the dignity of being recognized as the one who kept them afloat, maybe I could stomach it. But humiliating me publicly, roasting me about sexual details, that was the final straw. I began to plan, and if that sounds dramatic, so be it. Sometimes the only way to open someone's eyes is a swift, merciless jolt. They kept calling, texting, leaving voicemails. I ignored them for days. Then I picked up once I'd gotten my ducks in a row. Salvador was on the other end. "Dad, come on, we need to talk. You can't just ghost us," he said. I forced a trembling sigh. "I'm sorry, Sal, I'm hurt. You guys blindsided me at the party. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it." He paused, likely expecting me to blow up. When I didn't, he said, "Look, we were just telling the truth. Yeah, maybe it was harsh, but you needed to hear it. And the name change stuff, it's just that the Wilson name doesn't feel right anymore. It's not personal." "Not personal?" My voice rose an octave and I tamped it down. "Okay, well, if that's how you truly feel, I guess I won't stand in your way. Did you need me to sign something?" Yeah." He sounded surprised at how quick I was giving in. "We have some documents that require your permission and a notary. Maybe we can meet up for dinner, talk it through?" His tone was so smug, so sure I would capitulate, and I decided I would in the short term so I could line up my real moves. "Sure," I murmured. I do want to make things right. Let's get dinner." "Great," Salvador said, clearly trying to restrain his satisfaction. "I'll let Frank and Damien know." He set up a reservation at an upscale Italian place near his neighborhood. It was the kind of spot with $35 pasta dishes, the kind they'd never invite me to unless they intended for me to pick up the tab. Typical. I played along, intentionally letting my voice waver when we spoke again on the phone, like I was emotionally drained and beaten down. They bought it, hook, line, and sinker. When Saturday came, I arrived at the Italian restaurant in an old shirt, wrinkled from having slept in it the night before. I left some stubble on my cheeks. The hostess looked me up and down with a polite smile that probably hid her judgment. I told her I was with the Wilson party, and she directed me to a round table near the back, set for 5, where Bernice and the boys were already seated. Bernice gave me her usual forced little wave, wearing a tight blouse that screamed, "I work out and I want everyone to know it." She'd probably come from CrossFit. The smell of perfume around her was strong enough to tingle the nostrils. Damien was on his phone, flipping through TikTok or God knows what. Franklin tapped the tablecloth, glancing around like he was bored. Salvador gave me that bright grin, the same one I used to see when he'd scored a soccer goal in elementary school. "Dad," Salvador said, standing up as I approached. "I'm glad you made it," I nodded weakly. "Yeah, thanks for inviting me." Bernice pursed her lips into a sympathetic shape. "We're all here for you, Eugene. We just want you to be honest with yourself and us." Honest. The hypocrisy almost made me choke. I sat down quietly, ignoring the concerned looks from a few people at adjacent tables who were obviously picking up on the tension. The waitress came by, took our drink orders. I asked for a water. No need for a glass of wine or scotch tonight. I wanted my mind razor sharp. Salvador kicked things off. "Dad, I know this must have been rough for you. What we did at your party. Maybe it seemed harsh, but we needed a dramatic way to get you to see how things really are." "Yeah?" I said softly, letting my gaze drop. I guess I didn't realize how much I'd messed up. Damien lifted his eyes from his phone, put on a contrite face. "Look, Dad, you were never there for us when we needed you emotionally. Mom was the one who actually listened. So that video was like a reflection of what we've been feeling for years." Bernice reached across the table, patted my hand. "You have to admit, Eugene, you never tried spicing up our marriage. You made me feel invisible, and that's why I had to find happiness elsewhere. That was a private matter," I murmured, my eyes on the crisp white tablecloth. "I didn't think it was fair to bring it up in front of all those people." She shrugged. "They deserve to know the truth. And so did you." Franklin jumped in. "Dad, it wasn't just about your marriage. You always acted like the tough guy, the provider, but it was never enough. You missed out on too many moments. You never tried to understand who we are, what we want from life." Every word from them felt like an arrow laced with poison, but I reminded myself to keep calm, to look suitably dejected. "I'm sorry," I managed. "I really am." They exchanged glances, smug, satisfied glances. I watched Bernice's lips tighten as though she was mentally patting herself on the back for orchestrating this. The waitress returned with our drinks. We each ordered dinner. Salvador got some expensive pasta dish with fresh scallops. Bernice asked for a salmon and shrimp combo. Franklin and Damien went for the fancy steak. I got the cheapest pasta on the menu. While we waited for the food, they laid it on thick. Salvador talked about how no father figure made him uncertain about how to handle adult responsibilities, ignoring, of course, that I've been quietly paying half his mortgage. Franklin hammered me about my lack of empathy, how he couldn't come to me with emotional problems. Damien nodded along, adding his own commentary about me missing some of his baseball games or never taking him on father-son camping trips as a teenager. I sat there, absorbing it, letting them condemn me. They all had perfect revisionist history, each casting me as a stoic tyrant or an absentee. Bernice interjected occasionally, piling on details that I recognized as half-truths or total distortions. Yet I never snapped. I just lowered my eyes and gave them exactly what they wanted. A father who begs for forgiveness. Then came the reason they orchestrated the dinner. Franklin cleared his throat. "Dad, the name change paperwork, we're kind of on a deadline. We need your signature on a few documents, confirming you're aware and not contesting it. The judge won't finalize it without your written consent." Bernice put on a sweet tone. "We just want everything to be legal and above board. It's not about hurting you further. It's just what the boys need to move on." I nodded, my stomach roiling with contained disgust. "Sure, if that's what you all truly want." Salvador beamed. "Dad, that means a lot, thank you." Our entrees arrived, which gave me a few minutes to eat quietly, fake trembling hands to keep up the pitiful show. The conversation stalled, replaced by the scrape of forks on plates and the occasional forced cough. After we finished our meals, before dessert, they fanned out the documents in front of me like a deck of cards. I scrawled my signature wherever they pointed, silently noting every pen stroke. I even asked, "Are you sure about this? Once it's done, there's no undoing it." Damien paused, but Bernice and Salvador nodded firmly. Franklin looked away, swallowing. So I completed the final signature. The younger waitress passed by, collecting empty plates, and I felt her eyes flicker over the tension-filled scene. When the check came, Salvador seamlessly slid it in my direction. I took out my wallet, paid nearly $200 for the five of us. Put a generous tip, too, just to keep them fooled. I left that place feeling the weight of defeat on my shoulders. But behind my eyes, a spark of satisfaction glimmered. Because the second I got home, I initiated my real plan. Mortgage transfers, gone. I logged into my online banking and canceled the monthly $1,200 transfer to Salvador's account. Tuition check. I'd just written one for Damien's next semester. I called the bank and placed a stop payment on it. Franklin's gambling lifeline. I was the only safety net preventing him from falling off a financial cliff. So I blocked his number and told my bank to flag any suspicious large transfers if he tried to sweet-talk me again. I wasn't naive about how they'd react, but I wanted to see how quickly their so-called moral high ground crumbled when money was on the line. Sure enough, less than a week passed before the meltdown began. Salvador left me 13 voicemails, the last one, an enraged rant. "Dad, you can't just stop paying. The bank's threatening foreclosure. Erica's furious. We have a meeting with the mortgage company tomorrow. God, you're screwing me over." Damien started texting me screenshots of overdue notices from his university. Then he'd fire off insults like, "You're proving you're a real piece of shit. You know that? You can't do this to your own son." Franklin tried to call, realized he was blocked, and then used a friend's phone to leave me a voicemail. In it, he said, "Real classy, Dad. If I get jumped by the guys I owe, that's on you. You want to see me in a hospital bed or in a ditch? Keep ignoring me then." Not one of them apologized for the cruel humiliation they put me through. Instead, they each demanded that I go back to being their ATM. It was a new breed of arrogance, but hardly surprising. For years, they saw me as a doormat, so they figured they could stomp harder. The day after Franklin's pathetic voicemail, I took it a step further. I gathered the screenshots of his frantic texts about gambling debts, the screenshots of transactions labeled poker bailout, and everything else. Then I composed a new email under an address he wouldn't recognize and fired it off to his fiancée, Malia. Subject line: "What your fiancé isn't telling you." A few days later, I got a knock on my door. It was Malia, tears streaking her face, phone in hand. She asked to confirm whether the info was real. I simply said, "I'm not going to lie to you, it's the truth." She sniffled, whispered a shaky "thank you," and left. From what I heard through the grapevine, she packed her stuff that same day and split. Good for her. Franklin unleashed a barrage of texts and voicemails, accusing me of ruining his life and labeling me mentally unstable, vindictive, a cold-blooded bastard. "Yeah, you bet I'm cold-blooded," I mumbled at one point, reading the messages. "Where was your compassion when you humiliated me in front of all my friends?" But the highlight was Bernice's meltdown. She spammed my phone with texts about how I needed to fix this, that the boys were in crisis, and how I should think of the family's best interest instead of being petty. This from the woman who stood up at my party and declared my bedroom skills insufficient for the entire world to hear. The hypocrisy was so thick I could have gagged on it. I ignored it all, letting them stew in their own decisions. I was sleeping better than I had in years, no longer jerking awake at 4 a.m. worried about how to cover the kids' next crisis. My finances were stable again. For once, I could afford to buy groceries without counting pennies. I even scheduled a dentist appointment I'd been putting off for a while. The shift was liberating, but I wasn't done. I needed final closure, and they needed a final dose of reality. So I sent a group text. "I want to make amends and figure out a solution. Let's have a proper sit-down at my house this weekend. We'll have lunch, talk it out. I'll order Chinese, please come." They all replied within 10 minutes. Salvador: "Yes, Dad. Thanks. We need to talk." Franklin: "I'll be there." Damien: "Sure." Bernice: "We'll fix this, Eugene." Their desperation was palpable. They probably thought I was going to fold under pressure, that the father they'd manipulated for so long was about to cave. Good. Let them think that. On Saturday, I spent the morning tidying up my small two-bedroom bungalow. I vacuumed the living room rug, dusted off the old end tables, and tidied the kitchen. It wasn't a grand house, just a modest place in a working-class neighborhood. Originally, Bernice and I had bigger plans for a dream home, but once she found her CrossFit trainer fling, all that went to hell. Around 11:45 a.m., the doorbell rang. To my surprise, Bernice was early. She wore snug workout pants, her hair in a sleek ponytail. Perfume thick as always. "Eugene," she said, stepping inside, "I'm glad you're doing this. We need to talk about the kids. They're hurting." I nodded. "Sure they are. Food's on the way." I didn't invite her to sit. She found her old seat on the couch anyway, crossing her legs. By noon, all three boys arrived, looking haggard. Damien's hoodie was rumpled, eyes bloodshot like he'd been crying or maybe just depressed. Franklin's hair was messy, stubble covering his chin. Salvador had dark circles under his eyes that not even coffee could mask. Good. Maybe a piece of them realized the cost of their betrayal. I put out paper plates, napkins, plastic utensils. The Chinese food arrived, enough for an army. General Tso's beef and broccoli, fried rice, lo mein, egg rolls, and crab rangoon. I set it all on the small dining table. "Help yourselves," I said. They piled food onto plates, then carried them to the living room, glancing around like a bunch of nervous strangers. Bernice perched on the edge of the armchair, picking at her hot and sour soup. Franklin kept sighing dramatically. Salvador's leg bounced incessantly. Damien stared at the floor. I sat in the recliner, plate balanced on my lap. For a solid 5 minutes, the only sound was chewing, plates clinking, the hum of the HVAC. Finally, I cleared my throat and said, "I have something to show you all." They looked up, half eager, half fearful. I grabbed my laptop, plugged it into the TV with an HDMI cable. I could feel Bernice's eyes following my every move. I navigated to the file labeled Birthday Presentation and hit play. The screen showed the exact same humiliating slideshow they'd played for me, only this time the roles were reversed. They were the audience, forced to watch their cruelty up close. Bernice's narration began. Eugene Wilson, failed husband, failed father, failed man. The scene cut to images of me looking dejected, pictures I never knew existed. Then it cut to Bernice's vile commentary about me in bed. The entire living room reverberated with her voice, mocking me. I didn't take my eyes off them. Franklin's jaw clenched, face reddening. Salvador stared in horror while Bernice's cheeks flushed deep crimson. Damien set his plate on the floor, tears brimming. The video ended with their speech about changing their names to Bernice's maiden name, each of them basically disowning me. I closed the file, paused for a moment. The only sound was the HVAC clicking. "Why did you show us that?" Bernice asked in a trembling voice. "We know what it was. We were there. We've apologized." "Really?" I cocked my head. "I don't recall any sincere apology. But I wanted to make sure you remember exactly what you did, because that's why we're here today." I stood, retrieving 4 manila folders from a nearby shelf. The first I handed to Salvador. "Inside is a record of every mortgage payment I made for you, month by month, for the past 3 years. $43,200 total. You told your mother I only helped with the down payment, but no, this is the proof. Included is a letter explaining I won't seek repayment, but I'm done. No more money. Your house is your responsibility." His face blanched, eyes scanning the documents. "Dad, I can't." I turned away, pressing the second folder into Franklin's lap. "Franklin, these are screenshots of every single gambling debt I covered, plus proof that I enrolled you in an online gambling addiction program, completely free, by the way. You either show up or you don't. That's your choice. But I won't send you another dime. No more bailouts." He flipped through the pages, face twisted in a mixture of rage and embarrassment. "You outed me to Malia," he spat. "You ruined my life." I ignored that. "You did that yourself, son." I moved to Damien, the youngest. His folder showed all the tuition payments I'd quietly covered. "Damien, I paid off this semester's balance so you wouldn't get kicked out midterm, but after that, you're on your own. FAFSA, scholarships, part-time work, figure it out. You're an adult now." He looked like he was about to cry. "Dad, please. I wasn't the one who planned that video. It was Sal's idea. And Mom," I raised a hand, cutting him off. "You stood there, didn't you? You said your piece, changed your name. You sat by while your mother mocked me in front of my friends. You had a choice, and you made it." Lastly, I walked to Bernice. Her folder had photos of her with the CrossFit instructor she'd cheated on me with before our divorce. Time-stamped images I never submitted to court because I didn't want to drag the kids through the mud. She glanced at the pictures, eyes wide. "Is this really necessary?" she hissed, color draining from her face. "You told them I was to blame for the divorce," I said, voice low and hard. "You told them I was boring, I was a prude, I was incompetent in bed, but you left out how you were screwing your trainer long before you filed." Bernice's eyes flashed. We weren't intimate until after I left you." "Doesn't look that way, does it?" I jabbed my finger at the date and timestamps. "You want to keep lying or you want to admit the truth now?" Salvador let out a strangled sound. Mom, are those real? She flushed a deep red. It was complicated. Your father was neglectful. It was just an emotional affair at first. Stop, I growled. I'm done with the excuses. She slammed the folder shut, trembling with either fury or shame, maybe both. I took a step back, looking at all of them. I sold the house that I inherited from my folks, the one you all assumed you'd get one day. It's gone. I have a chunk of money now, and I'm going to use it for myself, not for ungrateful, spiteful children who humiliate me. You can't do that, Franklin blurted, face burning. Grandma's house was mine, left to me. It's sold. The money is in my account. I turned to them. And while we're on the subject of names, I filed my own name change. So congratulations, you got your wish. There won't be any Wilson to carry on. You didn't want it, so neither do I. I'm taking my mother's maiden name. Paperwork's done. The tension in the air was suffocating. Salvador tried to speak. Dad, we never wanted it to come to this. Franklin's voice cracked with anger. You're screwing us over because you're petty about the stupid party. We were trying to show you how you messed up. Don't even start, I barked. That so-called stupid party was malicious. You humiliated me, then demanded I sign documents so you could legally disown me. You wanted a father you could blame for your problems, not an actual person. Bernice stood up, glaring. Eugene, you're pushing this too far. You're destroying your relationships with your sons. They're going to resent you forever. My laugh was hollow, echoing in the small living room. Resent me? They've shown me nothing but resentment for years. Now they can resent me without picking my pocket at the same time. From the corner, Damien let out a choked sob. Dad, I'm sorry. I thought it was a joke that went too far, but then everything spiraled. What did you think would happen when you all lined up to publicly crucify me? My voice shook. I never cursed at my kids when they were younger, but at this moment it felt fitting. It's not a fucking joke. That was my life, my dignity, and you all turned it into some twisted comedic roast. Salvador's leg jiggled faster. Let's just calm down. We can talk. I cut him off. There's no calm conversation left. I invited you here to show you that video, hand you these folders, and say we're done. I scanned the room. Finish your food or leave it. Doesn't matter to me. Lock the door when you go. I grabbed my jacket, phone, and keys, heading for the door. Where are you going? Bernice demanded. Her tone suddenly panicked. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. Lunch date, I said. I've met someone. A woman who actually respects me. We're going for a drive in the country. I won't be back until late, so make sure the place is locked if you decide to stay. With that, I stepped outside. Just as the door was closing, I heard Franklin yell, "This is bullshit!" and Bernice hissing something about how they needed to unify their stories. I didn't bother sticking around to decipher the rest. I climbed into my car, an old sedan, but one I kept running smooth. For a moment, I sat there, heart thudding, hands trembling from what I'd just done. Some part of me whispered that I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. But another voice reminded me, it was never me who broke this family. They severed the bond long ago. I just made it official. As I pulled away, I glanced in the mirror. Through the front window, Bernice stood frozen, pale, clutching her folder. Damien sat slumped on the couch, face buried in his hands. Franklin paced in circles, animated and angry. Salvador stared blankly, mortgage documents in his lap like bricks. I almost felt bad. Almost. But beneath it all, a cold satisfaction settled. I wasn't their doormat anymore. That evening, I drove out to a quiet park and met Audrey, a woman I'd been seeing. She was divorced, had grown kids who respected her. We met in a hiking group online. I still shook from the confrontation, but when she smiled, no judgment, no pressure, I felt the weight in my chest lighten. I didn't tell her the full story, just that I had a rough day with family. We walked and talked about trails, seasons, birds. It was the first time in years I felt like I could breathe. The fallout was immediate. Salvador teetered on losing his house. Erica called crying, begging me to reconsider helping. I told her it was between her and Salvador, and hung up. Damien messaged over and over, torn between blame and guilt. You didn't have to sabotage my tuition, he wrote. I responded, get a job, good luck. Franklin, same story, guilt trips, angry texts. I blocked him again. Bernice spread rumors about me having a late-life crisis. Relatives called with concern until I forwarded the birthday video. After that, the silence was golden. When the name change went through, I felt relief. No longer Eugene Wilson. I'd taken my mother's name, Braun. The only person who ever stood by me. If they didn't want my name, I didn't either. Let them keep theirs. I took back something real. Soon after, I finally did something I'd always wanted. I went to Yellowstone. Bernice once said camping was beneath us. Well, she was wrong. That canyon, that waterfall spray on my face, it reminded me there's a whole life outside their dysfunction. I started planning more. Tetons, maybe Alaska. I had vacation days saved and no one left to spend them on but me. 2 months later, I got home from work and saw Bernice's SUV in my driveway. She stood with folded arms, my son's behind her. I parked at the curb. They'd found me, even though the mailbox now read Ebron. I stepped out. What do you want? Salvador spoke first. We need help. I'm losing the house. Franklin's a wreck. Damien might drop out. Mom's falling apart. Please, Dad. I stared. You remember what you did at my birthday, humiliating me, cutting me off? Now you come crawling back because you need money? Damien stepped forward, tears in his eyes. I'm sorry. I followed them. I wanted you to be proud of me. A part of me softened, but not enough. It's too late, Damien, Franklin sneered. You're acting like a petty bitch. We came to apologize. I cut him off. Don't. You humiliated me, lied to Malia, lost thousands gambling. Now you want my money? Bernice snapped. They're your sons. No, they were your soldiers when you'd wanted to destroy me. You pushed me out. Don't expect me to fix your mess now. She sniffed. You've changed. Yes, I said. I had to. They lingered, not believing I wouldn't budge. Finally, Salvador muttered, let's go. Franklin spit on the sidewalk. Screw you. Damien looked back, whispering, I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't reply. I just walked inside and locked the door behind me.